Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just the universe preparing us for who we're meant to become. In the unforgiving heartland, where fortunes are built on grit and destroyed by greed, a new legend is about to be told. It's a tale whispered through the rustling fields and hushed financial corridors, a testament to the unseen forces that shape destiny and the quiet power born from profound injustice. Prepare yourselves, for the soil remembers every seed and every betrayal. The polished marble floor of the First Agricultural Bank felt like a slab of winter ice against Margaret Cole's cheek. The fluorescent lights hummed with a cold indifference, casting a clinical glare on her crumpled, modest clothes. A sharp pain shot through her hip, a familiar ache, an unwelcome souvenir of time, now exacerbated by the brutal impact of her fall. Somewhere in the periphery of her blurring vision, she could see the scuffed toe of a security guard's boot, then another, moving to hoist her. The indignity burned hotter than the physical pain, searing her very soul. A gasp, a muted whisper, a stifled laugh, the cacophony of a world passing judgment on an old woman who simply needed help. They were dragging her, slowly, deliberately, towards the imposing glass doors, her protests barely a raspy breath caught in her throat. The faces of the customers, a blur of concern, curiosity, and sickening indifference, swam before her eyes. Freeze frame. She was just an old woman, a nuisance, a shadow to be swept away. They thought she was a beggar, an inconvenience, a stain on their pristine financial temple. They had no idea whose mother she was. There are truths that only reveal themselves when everything we know falls apart. The morning had started with a quiet, almost ritualistic solemnity. Margaret Cole had woken with the first blush of dawn painting the sky in soft mauves and grays over the distant, dormant fields. The air, crisp with the lingering chill of a late spring, carried the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and nascent green, a fragrance she had known and loved for over 70 years. Her small kitchen, cozy and worn, was a sanctuary of routine. She moved slowly, her movements economical, practiced over 7 decades of life, each motion a quiet assertion against the relentless tide of age. The kettle whistled a thin, reedy tune, and she poured the steaming water over a tea bag, watching the amber liquid unfurl, a small, everyday magic. Her hands, gnarled and spotted with age, trembled slightly as she stirred a spoonful of sugar into her mug. Arthritis, a constant companion, seemed particularly insistent today, its grip a reminder of the body's eventual betrayals. Yet her spirit remained unyielding, forged in the crucible of countless harvests on the Cole family farm, a century-old legacy that hummed beneath the very soil of Copper Creek. On the faded floral tablecloth, a patchwork of worn memories, lay a small, plastic pill dispenser. With meticulous care, she pushed out the required tablets for the morning, a rainbow of necessities that kept her body from completely betraying her. The doctor had been clear: regular medication, proper rest, and most importantly, the necessary procedures to address the persistent weakness in her heart. Each pill was a small victory, a temporary truce in the ongoing battle against time. The cost, however, was a different kind of battle, one fought with numbers and paper, a relentless skirmish against the creeping tendrils of medical debt. Her gaze drifted to the envelope beside her plate, a crisp white rectangle containing a check. It wasn't a large sum, not by the standards of the world Daniel Brooks inhabited, but it was enough. Asterisk should asterisk have been enough for the next round of her treatments. It represented months of careful budgeting, of making do, of choosing necessity over comfort. A sacrifice silently made so that the farm, the real anchor of her existence, could continue its quiet churn through another season. The funds were her personal savings, a small cushion against the vast uncertainties of life and land, carefully built over a lifetime of prudent stewardship. A tiny fraction of the silent wealth her son, James, had meticulously cultivated around the family's deep roots in the region. She had considered calling her son James. For a fleeting moment, her fingers hovered over the worn rotary dial of her landline phone, a relic in an increasingly digital world. James would drop everything, of course. He always did. He was a good son, fiercely protective, almost to a fault. But Margaret prided herself on her independence, a trait as ingrained as the fertile earth of their homestead. She'd raised James to be a man of integrity, a man who stood on his own 2 feet, and she believed in leading by example, even in her twilight years. This was a simple transaction, a withdrawal from her account, a right she had earned 1,000 times over. She had done it countless times before. There was no need to bother him, to pull him away from his demanding work. He carried enough weight on his shoulders already, managing the complex machinations of county governance and, unknown to many, overseeing the subtle, powerful currents that flowed through the region's agricultural economy, protecting the very fabric of their way of life. No, she would go alone. It was just a bank. What could possibly go wrong? She folded the check carefully, once, then twice, tucking it into the worn leather purse that had been her companion for decades, its scuffs and faded leather mirroring the wrinkles of her own seasoned life. A slight frown creased her brow. The walk wasn't far, but the spring air, while pleasant, held a deceptive coolness that seemed to sink into her bones. She pulled on her thickest cardigan, its wool soft and familiar against her skin, a testament to countless winters endured. The mirror showed her a reflection of a woman etched with life story's deep lines around her eyes, silver hair pulled back in a simple bun, clothes practical and unadorned. She saw resilience, dignity, the quiet strength of the land. What others might see, she couldn't control, but the universe, she mused, had a strange way of bringing things to light. The first agricultural bank of Copper Creek stood like a fortress of glass and steel amidst the low-slung brick buildings of the town square. Its modern facade, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces, seemed to absorb the rural light and spit it back, cold and impersonal, a stark monument to a new kind of power that had begun to overshadow the traditional rhythms of the land. Margaret paused for a moment on the steps, gathering her breath, the familiar scent of blooming azaleas from the town park clashing strangely with the sterile, metallic tang she already anticipated from inside. The scent of blossoming azaleas, a sweet, fleeting promise of summer, suddenly felt alien, cloying. She pushed open the heavy glass door, a faint chime announcing her arrival, a sound that seemed to shrivel in the vast, unforgiving space. The change in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. The warmth of the spring morning evaporated, replaced by the hushed, climate-controlled chill of the interior. The air was thick with the faint smell of money, stale coffee, and a pervasive, unspoken judgment. Her entrance wasn't just noticed. It was asterisk felt asterisk. The quiet murmur of transactions seemed to falter, then resume, but with a different cadence, a new underlying hum of unspoken commentary. Margaret, accustomed to being invisible, a quiet observer of life's passing parade, suddenly felt spotlighted, every threadbare patch on her cardigan, every wrinkle on her face scrutinized. It was as if her very presence was an affront to the polished veneer of prosperity. The staff, a collection of neatly dressed young men and women, seemed to pause mid-sentence, their heads swiveling in her direction. Their eyes, sharp and dismissive, swept over her simple attire, her tired posture, the worn leather of her purse. A few, she noticed, exchanged quick, knowing glances, a subtle roll of the eyes. Whispers began, soft at first, like dry leaves skittering across a pavement, then growing bolder, bolder still. They were not meant for her ears, yet they landed with the precision of thrown stones, each fragment a shard of disdain. She heard fragments. Another one, looking for handouts. Doesn't she know this isn't a charity? The words were muffled, distorted, but the intent was clear, etched on their faces, on their dismissive gestures. It was the judgment of a world that valued appearance over substance, wealth over worth. At the far end of the expansive lobby, near the entrance to the executive offices, 2 security guards stood, their uniforms crisp, their posture rigid like sentinels guarding a vault of secrets. One, a burly man with a thick mustache, caught her eye. He didn't just stare, he openly laughed, a low, guttural chuckle that he quickly stifled behind a meaty hand, but not before the sound reached her, vibrating through the cold air. It was a laugh of contempt, of assumed superiority, a sound that stripped away any pretense of service or respect, leaving only raw, naked disdain. Margaret felt her cheeks flush, a slow, hot wave of shame creeping up her neck, a humiliation that threatened to buckle her knees. She straightened her shoulders, a lifetime of quiet pride asserting itself, despite the tremor in her hands. She was a customer, just like the immaculately dressed woman discussing stock options at the next counter, or the sharp-suited man with the expensive briefcase. Her money was as green as theirs, her needs as valid. She ignored their stares, their whispers, their laughter, hardening her resolve, and made her way toward the shortest line, her footsteps echoing a little too loudly in the cavernous space. The cold silence of the bank felt less like an invitation and more like a warning, a premonition of the confrontation to come. She reached the counter, positioning herself behind a young couple debating the merits of a new mortgage, their eager voices a jarring contrast to the tension that clung to Margaret. The air here was heavy with the scent of cheap perfume and the faint metallic tang of a cash-counting machine, symbols of a superficial prosperity that seemed to mock her simple purpose. When it was her turn, the teller, a young woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and eyes that seemed permanently bored, barely lifted her gaze from her computer screen. Her name tag, gleaming brass against a dark blouse, read Tiffany. She was an embodiment of the bank's new, impersonal face, a gatekeeper of petty rules and unspoken prejudices. Next, Tiffany clipped, her voice thin and devoid of warmth, her eyes still glued to the monitor, as if Margaret were an inconvenience that might disappear if ignored long enough, a glitch in the pristine matrix of the bank's day. Margaret placed her worn purse on the counter, its leather smoothed by years of use, then extracted the carefully folded check. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft, perhaps a little more fragile than she intended, yet imbued with an unwavering politeness. "I'd like to withdraw some money, please." She slid the check across the polished surface, a small offering in a temple of cold transactions. Tiffany's eyes finally flickered down to the check, then up to Margaret's face, a slow, dismissive survey that stripped Margaret of her identity, reducing her to a stereotype. A faint smirk played on her lips, a tiny, almost imperceptible curl of disdain. "This is a personal check, ma'am," she stated, her tone laced with condescension, as if Margaret were an imbecile who didn't understand basic banking. "For a withdrawal, we typically require a valid ID and a signature." She didn't pick up the check, didn't even unfold it. It lay there, an offense, a challenge, a symbol of Margaret's diminished status. "Yes, I have my ID," Margaret replied, reaching into her purse for her driver's license, her movements still precise, composed. "And it's a check from my personal account here at the bank, written out to myself. I simply need to access the funds." Her voice remained polite, calm, a stark contrast to the teller's increasingly condescending tone, a quiet battle of wills unfolding beneath the humming fluorescent lights. Tiffany sighed dramatically, a loud, put-upon sound that resonated with exaggerated impatience. "Look, ma'am, we have procedures. You just can't walk in here with that asterisk and expect instant service." She finally deigned to pick up the check, holding it by the very edge, as if it might contaminate her manicured fingers, as if Margaret's carefully saved money carried some invisible taint. She unfolded it with a flourish, then scrunched her nose. "This amount? For cash?" Her voice was laced with disbelief, bordering on outright disgust. The sum, modest as it was clearly deemed too large for someone of Margaret's apparent station, too significant to be treated with respect, too much of an inconvenience for Tiffany's carefully managed schedule. "And frankly, your account balance isn't exactly robust enough for such a large cash withdrawal without prior notice," she added, an insinuation that cut deeper than any direct insult, implying Margaret was a financial liability, not a valued customer. She pushed the check back across the counter, her fingers tapping impatiently. "I'm afraid I can't process this without management approval, and frankly, they're busy with real clients." The blatant disrespect, the outright refusal to even entertain her request, was a cold shock. Margaret felt a knot tighten in her stomach, a familiar ache of injustice. "But I am a client," she insisted, her voice gaining a little more firmness, a spark of indignation igniting in her tired eyes. "And it's my money." "What's the problem?" Tiffany rolled her eyes, a gesture so overt it was almost theatrical, an open declaration of contempt. "The problem, ma'am, is that you're holding up the line, and you don't fit the profile of a typical cash withdrawal for this amount. It's just suspicious." She gestured vaguely towards Margaret's simple attire, her implication unmistakable, a silent judgment that echoed through the hushed bank. "You look poor, therefore you are suspicious. You do not belong here." A sudden, aggressive voice cut through the strained silence, sharp and demanding. "What's the holdup here, Tiffany?" Daniel Brooks, the branch manager, emerged from his glass-walled office, a crisp, perfectly tailored suit accentuating his imposing physique. He was a man who exuded an aura of calculated power, his slick-back hair and sharp features perpetually set in an expression of self-importance, a predator in a financial jungle. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept over the scene, landing on Margaret with immediate disdain. He didn't wait for Tiffany to explain. He saw an old woman in plain clothes causing a problem, an inconvenient ripple in the smooth surface of his carefully controlled domain. He believed the bank was his kingdom, and he, its undisputed king. "Manager Brooks, this woman is trying to make a rather large cash withdrawal without proper presentation," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with implication, eagerly reinforcing the narrative Brooks clearly expected. "And she's holding up the queue." Daniel Brooks strode forward, his expensive leather shoes clicking authoritatively on the marble floor, each step a declaration of his perceived dominance. He didn't ask Margaret any questions. He didn't acknowledge her presence as a human being. His gaze, devoid of empathy, seemed to pierce right through her, rendering her invisible, a nonentity. He looked at the check, still lying on the counter, then back at Margaret, his face contorting into a sneer of pure contempt. "Ma'am, we don't tolerate disruptions in my bank," he declared, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that echoed with thinly veiled threats. "If you don't have adequate funds or the proper documentation, you need to leave. This isn't a charity. We have high-profile clients who require our full attention." His words were a gauntlet thrown, a clear delineation of worth and worthlessness. "I do have adequate funds, and this is my account," Margaret said, her voice shaking slightly now, a tremor of fear mingled with growing anger, a raw defiance bubbling to the surface. "I simply want to withdraw my own money for a medical emergency." The thought of her doctor's appointment, her fragile heart, fueled her resolve. "Emergency?" Brooks scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand as if her needs were a trivial inconvenience. "Sounds like an excuse to me. And quite frankly, your appearance and demeanor suggest you're not exactly our target demographic for significant transactions. This is a bank, ma'am, not a soup kitchen." He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his imposing figure looming over her, an act of intimidation designed to break her spirit. "Now I'm going to ask you one last time to leave, or I will have you removed." The threat hung in the air, cold and undeniable. Margaret stood her ground, a fragile monument to dignity, a lifetime of quiet resilience crystallizing in her stance. "I'm a shareholder of this bank, Mr. Brooks, and I demand to be treated with respect. I have every right to access my funds." The words, spoken quietly, seemed to hang in the air, unbelievable in their audacity, a revelation from a woman he had so utterly dismissed. Brooks burst out laughing, a harsh, derisive sound that echoed through the lobby, drawing every eye, every whisper. "A shareholder? You? That's rich. Do you know what kind of capital one needs to be a shareholder in this institution? Get real, old woman. Don't waste my time with fantasies." His face darkened, his patience, or rather his pretense of it, evaporating, replaced by raw fury. "Security, get this woman out of my bank. She's causing a disturbance and making ridiculous claims." His voice was a whip crack, his eyes blazing with self-righteous anger. Before Margaret could utter another word, the two security guards, spurred into action by Brooks's explicit command, moved swiftly, like hounds unleashed. The burly guard from earlier, the one who had laughed, grabbed her arm roughly, his grip bruising, a cruel echo of his earlier contempt. The other guard moved to her other side, their combined force overwhelming her frail frame. "Let go of me," Margaret cried, a flash of genuine fear now in her eyes, a primal scream of injustice. Her purse, clutched tightly in her hand, slipped and fell, its contents scattering across the polished floor, a small wallet, a tube of lipstick, her precious pill dispenser, its tiny capsules rolling like lost marbles, each one a vital piece of her life. Brooks watched impassively, a cold, satisfied glint in his eyes as Margaret struggled, a cruel triumph etched on his face. He then shoved her, a quick, brutal push to her shoulder that sent her stumbling backward. Her foot caught on the edge of the counter, and she lost her balance completely. Her head struck the marble floor with a sickening thud, a sharp, white flash of pain exploding behind her eyes, a starburst of agony. She lay there, disoriented, the security guards already pulling at her arms, their faces grim, their movements relentless, dragging her across the lobby, past the staring, silent customers and towards the heavy glass doors. No one intervened, not a single person. The humiliation was absolute, crushing, a weight that threatened to suffocate her. The last thing she saw before the doors swung shut behind her was the triumphant smirk on Daniel Brooks's face, a vision that would haunt her and ignite a firestorm. The spring air, once cool and inviting, now felt sharp, cutting, a betrayal after the sterile assault. Margaret pulled herself up from the concrete sidewalk, her hips screaming in protest, a fiery spear of agony lancing through her, her head throbbing with a dull, persistent ache. Her vision swam for a moment, the world tilting unpleasantly, colors blurring into a nauseating haze. She tasted blood, a small cut on the inside of her lip where her teeth had caught it when she fell, the metallic tang a brutal counterpoint to the sweetness of spring. The bitter tang mingled with the hot, salty rush of tears that finally overflowed, blurring the already distorted world into an indistinguishable swirl of pain and injustice. The bank's glass facade shimmered in the afternoon sun, a mocking, impenetrable fortress, its reflective surfaces mirroring her shattered dignity. She could feel the lingering stares from within, the imagined whispers, the triumph of her oppressors, the cold, calculating eyes of a system that had deemed her unworthy. She was outside, abandoned, her frail body a testament to the cruelty of the moment, with nothing but the echoes of their contempt to keep her company. Her purse lay open on the pavement, a few coins glinting dully amongst the scattered contents, like lost hopes. The pill dispenser, once so neatly arranged, was now a fractured casing, its life-sustaining capsules spread haphazardly across the grimy concrete, each tiny cylinder a crucial, immediate need now scattered to the winds. With trembling hands, Margaret knelt, wincing as her stiff knees protested, sending fresh waves of pain through her aging joints. She began to painstakingly collect her scattered belongings, each item a small piece of her shattered dignity, retrieved from the indifferent pavement. The check, thankfully, was still clutched tightly in her hand, a desperate, crumpled symbol of her unmet need, a tangible reminder of the battle she had just lost. The walk home was a blur of pain and shame, each step a testament to her resilience, but also a fresh jab of misery, a reminder of the raw wounds she carried. Her limp became more pronounced, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps, each inhale a struggle. The familiar route, usually a comforting passage through her quiet neighborhood, felt like a gauntlet, a public display of her disgrace. Every car that passed, every person she saw felt like an accuser, a witness to her public disgrace, their eyes, real or imagined, searing her with unspoken judgments. their assumption that she was exactly what the bank manager had implied: a nobody, a beggar, a problem to be dismissed. The scent of blossoming trees, usually a balm to her weary spirit, now felt cloying, suffocating, a stark contrast to the bitterness in her mouth, the acrid taste of injustice. The small, neat house, her sanctuary for decades, felt impossibly far away, a distant haven. When she finally reached her front door, exhaustion washed over her in a suffocating wave, her body and spirit utterly spent. She fumbled with the key, her fingers numb, and pushed inside. The quiet of her home was usually a comfort, a gentle embrace, but today it felt vast, echoing with the silence of her humiliation, amplifying the sound of her ragged breaths. She sank onto the old armchair in her living room, burying her face in her hands, allowing the dam of tears to finally break completely. The sobs were guttural, wrenching, the sound of a proud woman stripped bare, her lifetime of quiet strength momentarily shattered. The despair hollowed her out, leaving an aching void where her dignity once stood. She was not just hurt, she was erased. After a long, agonizing period, the intensity of her grief began to subside, leaving her hollowed out, aching, a phantom limb of pain still throbbing. She knew she couldn't let this stand. Not just for her own dignity, but for all the others who might be treated similarly, for the voiceless, the unseen, the overlooked. The bank's indifference had not just humiliated her. It had jeopardized her health, her very life, and by extension, the quiet, beating heart of the Cole farm. She looked at her trembling hands, then at the crumpled check, still clutched tight, a small, defiant banner. Her medical appointment, the urgent need. Slowly, deliberately, Margaret reached for the phone. Her fingers still trembled, but a steely resolve was beginning to harden in her eyes, replacing the raw pain with a cold, righteous anger. She dialed James's number, the familiar digits a lifeline, a thread connecting her to the one person who understood the deeper currents beneath the surface of Copper Creek. The phone rang once, twice, then his strong, steady voice answered, a voice that always carried the quiet assurance of deep competence. "Mom, everything okay? You usually call later." His tone was immediately laced with concern, picking up on the subtle change in her voice, the tremor she couldn't quite hide. He knew her too well. Margaret closed her eyes, trying to compose herself, to find the words that could articulate the profound wound she carried. The memory of Brooks's sneering face, of Tiffany's dismissive gaze, of the guard's rough hands, flashed behind her eyelids, a violent montage of shame. The words caught in her throat, choked by residual tears and a profound sense of injustice that felt almost cosmic in its weight. "Mom, what's wrong? You're crying." His voice was sharper now, laced with alarm, a rising tide of worry. Finally, she managed to speak, her voice raspy, barely a whisper, imbued with a pain that went far beyond the physical. It was the pain of erasure, of being made to feel less than human, of having her very existence denied. She could only manage one sentence, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of quiet resilience shattered, a demand for recognition from a world that had forgotten her. "They treated me like I didn't exist." Her voice cracked on the last word, the raw hurt a weapon she hadn't intended to wield. The unspoken plea, the demand for justice, hung in the air, connecting across the fragile wires. James Cole, the man who held the threads of Copper Creek County's intricate tapestry in his hands, sat in the quiet solitude of his home office, the phone pressed tight against his ear. The late afternoon sun, usually a welcome visitor, now cast long, unsettling shadows across his polished mahogany desk, mimicking the sudden darkness that had fallen upon his world. His mother's words, a simple declarative sentence, resonated in the stillness of the room, each syllable a hammer blow to his heart. "They treated me like I didn't exist." There was no dramatics in her voice, no angry tirade, no demand for retribution. Just a raw, understated pain that spoke volumes, a profound hurt from a woman who had taught him resilience. James knew his mother. Margaret Cole was a woman of quiet strength, a survivor who had weathered storms far greater than a disrespectful bank teller. She had nursed the Cole farm through droughts and floods, through market crashes and personal tragedies. Her hands, though gnarled, still possessed the silent wisdom of the earth. For her to admit such a profound hurt, to sound so utterly broken, meant the humiliation had been absolute, soul-deep, a violation of her inherent dignity. He pictured her, frail yet fiercely independent, dressed in her practical, unassuming clothes, and a cold rage, slow and dangerous, began to simmer beneath his calm exterior. It was a controlled burn, but no less devastating. He listened intently as she recounted, in halting, tear-choked phrases, the events at the bank. The stares, the whispers, the dismissive teller, Tiffany, the arrogant manager, Daniel Brooks, his sneering contempt, the physical shove, the cold drag out the door, the scattered pills. Each detail painted a vivid, sickening picture in his mind. The thought of his mother, his dignified, kind mother, lying on a cold marble floor, her needs dismissed, her very humanity denied, sent a tremor through his normally unflappable composure. It wasn't just a personal affront. It was an attack on the very principles he believed in, the quiet decency that was the bedrock of their community. It was an attack on the Cole name, a legacy intertwined with the land for a century, and a stark reminder of the financial chains that could still bind even the most resilient. He said nothing, not a single word of comfort or outrage, not because he was indifferent, but because he was processing. James Cole was not a man given to impulsive outbursts. His power lay in his strategic mind, his meticulous planning, his ability to dissect a situation and execute with surgical precision. He ran this county with a quiet efficiency that belied the vast influence he wielded, an influence built not on flash or ego, but on deep understanding of the land, its people, and the intricate financial currents that sustained them. From zoning regulations to agricultural subsidies, from infrastructure projects to key appointments, very little happened in Copper Creek without James Cole's knowledge, or more often, his direct approval. And his reach extended further, into the very bedrock of the regional economy, thanks to years of shrewd investments and an uncanny understanding of market forces. An understanding he had honed precisely to protect the smaller, vulnerable members of his community, to ensure the survival of family farms like their own. His mother's financial well-being, her silent share in the first agricultural bank, was just one of the many things he had quietly ensured, a testament to his foresight and her own unassuming wealth, carefully masked beneath her simple exterior. Brooks, the arrogant gatekeeper, had seen only a shadow, not the deep reservoir of power it represented. Now, that carefully constructed order had been violently disrupted by the crass arrogance of a man who looked no further than the surface. Brooks hadn't just insulted his mother. He had insulted everything James stood for: respect, dignity, the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of their apparent station. He had challenged the very foundation of the community James had painstakingly nurtured, a community built on a fragile balance between tradition and progress. This wasn't merely a personal slight. It was a systemic failure, a crack in the foundation of trust that held Copper Creek together. The bank, once a pillar, had become an instrument of oppression. A profound, silent decision solidified within him. It wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was about justice. It was about rectifying a grave wrong, about demonstrating that true power was not about outward display or social standing, but about integrity and respect. It was about ensuring that no one, especially not his mother, ever felt like they didn't exist again. It was about protecting the legacy of the Cole farm, a century of sweat and quiet pride, and extending that protection to every family clinging to their own piece of land. The silence on the phone stretched, heavy with unspoken promise. Margaret, on the other end, waited, perhaps expecting an apology for the world, a promise of swift action, but James offered something far more potent. Finally, James spoke, his voice low, steady, a carefully modulated rumble that conveyed a terrifying resolve. There was no dramatic pronouncement, no fiery declaration, no theatrical vow of vengeance. Just 3 simple words delivered with the weight of absolute authority, a quiet storm gathering on the horizon, ready to unleash its controlled fury. "Tomorrow, I'll come with you." The next morning dawned crisp and clear. A deceptively ordinary day mirroring the ordinary routine that had already begun inside the First Agricultural Bank of Copper Creek. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of cleaning products, creating a sterile, expectant atmosphere. Tiffany, the blonde teller, was already at her station, her phone cradled between her ear and shoulder as she gossiped with a colleague about the previous day's incident, still buzzing with the excitement of witnessing a problem being decisively handled. Daniel Brooks, resplendent in a new, even sharper suit, surveyed his domain from the glass confines of his office, a smug satisfaction still lingering from his decisive action yesterday. He believed he had handled a situation with commendable firmness, upholding the bank's image and sending a clear message about who belonged and who didn't. The security guards, too, seemed to walk with a renewed swagger, emboldened by their manager's approval, oblivious to the storm gathering just beyond the bank's gleaming facade. Everything was exactly the same, or so they thought. The mundane hummed, a prelude to the shattering. Outside, the ordinary began to fracture. The first hint came with a low, almost imperceptible hum that grew steadily louder, drawing the attention of passers-by like a silent siren. A sleek obsidian-black SUV, its windows tinted opaque, glided to a silent stop directly in front of the bank's main entrance. Its sheer presence, an understated emblem of significant power, commanded respect, a stark contrast to the usual pickup trucks and sedans that frequented Copper Creek. Before the security guards inside could even register its arrival, another followed, then another, until a formidable convoy of 3 identical vehicles lined the curb, their engines purring with barely contained power. The air around the bank crackled with an unspoken tension, a static charge of anticipation. Pedestrians paused, coffee cups halfway to their lips, instinctively recognizing the arrival of something out of the ordinary, something beyond the usual rhythm of small-town life. The cars weren't flashy, not ostentatious. They were the kind of vehicles that spoke of quiet, undeniable authority, of serious business, of power so ingrained it needed no outward display. Then, the doors opened. From the lead SUV emerged a tall, distinguished man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, his silver hair catching the morning light. He wasn't local. His sharp features and air of metropolitan gravitas marked him as someone from a much larger sphere, a world of high finance far removed from Copper Creek's agrarian pulse. He was followed by another, and then another, a small retinue of serious-faced individuals, their expressions carefully neutral, their movements precise, like a surgical team preparing for a delicate yet decisive operation. They were executives, perhaps, or high-level consultants, their presence radiating an undeniable importance that seemed to shrink the imposing bank building itself, making its glass and steel seem fragile. They moved with a collective purpose, their eyes scanning the entrance with a methodical intensity, before finally, silently, entering the bank, their arrival a sudden, chilling blast of cold air. Inside, the normal morning bustle seemed to freeze. Heads snapped up. Tiffany dropped her phone with a clatter, her face paling as she recognized the unfamiliar, terrifying gravitas. Brooks, from his office, watched with a sudden, unsettling lurch in his stomach. He didn't recognize any of these faces, yet the sheer aura of power they exuded was undeniable. These were not the usual high-profile clients he cultivated. These were men and women who operated on a different plane entirely, a sphere he aspired to, but had never truly touched. A cold dread began to seep into his carefully constructed composure. His mind raced, desperately trying to conjure a reason for their unexpected visit. An audit, a surprise inspection. Had he overlooked something, some minor infraction that had somehow attracted the attention of these titans? His earlier smugness evaporated, replaced by a tightening knot of anxiety, a cold, hard stone in his gut. The entire atmosphere of the bank had shifted, from mundane routine to a charged, silent expectation. The staff exchanged nervous glances, their whispers now laced with apprehension instead of gossip. The metallic scent of money and stale coffee had been replaced by the sharper, more intimidating tang of unspoken power, the scent of impending judgment. They knew, instinctively, that something significant was about to unfold, something far beyond the usual rhythm of daily transactions. The air crackled with a tension that portended a seismic shift, a reckoning for the arrogant. The polished glass doors of the First Agricultural Bank swung open again, this time with a deliberate slowness, as if announcing an arrival of immense significance, a carefully orchestrated tableau. All eyes, already fixed on the group of executives who now stood in the center of the lobby, turned, drawn by an invisible current. And there she was. Margaret Cole walked in, not with the hurried, uncertain steps of yesterday, nor with the weary slump of humiliation. Today, her stride was slow, measured, imbued with a quiet, unshakable dignity, a grace forged in a lifetime of tilling soil and weathering storms. She still wore her simple, practical clothes, the same cardigan, the same sensible shoes, but today they seemed to shroud a formidable presence rather than betray a lack, a quiet strength that emanated from her very core. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, sweeping over the now silent lobby, acknowledging the stunned faces of the staff, the gaping mouth of Tiffany, the dawning horror in Daniel Brooks's eyes. She carried herself with the stillness of a deep reservoir, calm on the surface, but holding immense power beneath. She was not a victim seeking pity. She was a witness seeking justice, a silent sentinel of a wronged truth. She wasn't alone. As Margaret stepped fully into the bank, a figure emerged from behind her, stepping forward with a natural authority that commanded immediate attention, an unspoken demand for respect. It was James Cole, her son. He wasn't in his usual county attire. Today he wore a suit of dark, unimpeachable quality, a subtle power radiating from his broad shoulders and steady gaze, a quiet force that filled the vast lobby. His eyes, usually warm and perceptive, were now cold, analytical, missing nothing, taking in every flicker of fear, every shift in posture. He moved with the quiet grace of a predator, utterly focused, his presence a stark contrast to the agitated energy of the bank staff. The instant James Cole's identity registered, a collective gasp rippled through the bank, a wave of shock washing over the hushed crowd. Tiffany's mouth hung open, her perfectly applied lipstick doing little to hide the sudden terror in her eyes, a dawning realization of her catastrophic error. The security guards, who yesterday had manhandled Margaret with such disdain, now seemed to shrink into their uniforms, their faces ashen, their arrogance evaporating like morning mist. Daniel Brooks, still watching from his office, felt the blood drain from his face, leaving a cold, clammy sensation, a physical manifestation of his rapidly spiraling control. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the carefully constructed hierarchy of his kingdom crumbling before his very eyes. The lead executive, the distinguished man who had arrived first, a figure known across the regional financial sector as Mr. Harrington, stepped forward, and to the astonishment of everyone present, extended his hand to James Cole. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice deep and respectful, a tone Brooks had only ever heard directed at himself. "We've been expecting you. We understand there was an unfortunate incident yesterday." The understatement was chilling, amplifying the gravity of the situation. James didn't shake his hand immediately. His eyes were fixed on Daniel Brooks, who was now stumbling out of his office, drawn by an irresistible, horrifying magnetism, like a moth to a flame he knew would consume him. The manager's face, usually a mask of arrogance, had utterly collapsed. It was a tableau of dawning realization, of abject terror, of a man watching his entire world crumble around him, brick by painstaking brick, his power, his status, his very identity dissolving into thin air. James finally turned back to the executive, a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He then placed a gentle, reassuring hand on his mother's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes, a silent declaration of his protective resolve. His gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of the terrified staff, then finally settling with an unnerving intensity on Daniel Brooks, holding him transfixed in a terrifying spotlight. "I believe my mother requested a simple withdrawal yesterday," James stated, his voice calm, yet carrying the undeniable resonance of absolute authority, a quiet thunder. It seems she was met with a misunderstanding. The word misunderstanding hung in the air, laden with unspoken implications, a chilling euphemism for abuse and profound disrespect. The executives exchanged glances, grim and knowing, a silent communion of power and consequence. The lead executive cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Indeed, Mr. Cole, we are deeply distressed to learn of the appalling treatment your mother received. This behavior is utterly unacceptable and goes against every principle this institution stands for. This bank was built by the hardworking families of this county, funded by their honest toil. It was never meant to be a fortress for the privileged or a weapon against the vulnerable." He paused, then delivered the fatal blow, his voice firm and unequivocal, the words echoing through the cavernous lobby. "For those of you unaware, Mr. James Cole is not just the esteemed county authority for Copper Creek, a role he executes with unparalleled integrity and influence across this region's vital agricultural sector. He is also, and has been for many years, a significant silent shareholder in this very bank, one of the largest, in fact, with holdings that dwarf most public investments. And Mrs. Margaret Cole, his mother, through a long-standing trust established by the Cole family's century-old agricultural legacy, is also a substantial shareholder in her own right, her contributions to this institution predating many of its current policies. Her request yesterday was not only valid, but came from a fundamental owner of this enterprise." The words landed like thunderclaps in the silent lobby. Shareholder, silent asterisk shareholder, substantial asterisk. Daniel Brooks swayed on his feet, his mind reeling, a dizzying spiral into chaos. The old woman he had dismissed as a beggar, the shareholder he had laughed at, was not only the mother of the most powerful man in the county but also a financial owner of his own institution. His face, already pale, now turned a ghastly shade of white, his eyes wide with a horrifying understanding of his catastrophic error. The very ground he stood on, the foundation of his perceived authority, had just liquefied beneath him, leaving him adrift in a sea of his own making. The cold, sterile air of the bank now felt suffocatingly hot, thick with the scent of his own fear, the pungent aroma of a career ending. The power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The quiet force of the land, personified by Margaret Cole, had finally met the arrogant edifice of unchecked financial power, and the edifice was beginning to crack. The silence that followed the executive's revelation was absolute, punctuated only by the distant hum of the bank's ventilation system, a mechanical breath in a room holding its own. Daniel Brooks stood frozen, a statue of petrified arrogance, his perfectly tailored suit now seeming to hang loosely on his suddenly diminished frame, a costume too grand for the actor. His face, a mask of unmitigated terror, was a roadmap of dawning realization, each wrinkle a fresh line of sweat, each bead a testament to his unraveling. He understood with chilling clarity the magnitude of his blunder. He had not just insulted an elderly woman. He had assaulted the mother of his ultimate authority, dismissed a significant owner of the very institution he managed, and publicly humiliated the family of the most powerful man in the county, a family whose roots ran deeper than any concrete foundation. The weight of his actions crushed him. James Cole watched him, his expression unreadable, a silent judge presiding over a swift, inevitable sentencing. He didn't need to speak. His presence, the presence of his mother by his side, and the solemn faces of the arriving executives said it all, a powerful, unspoken narrative. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of impending justice, a palpable tension that gripped every staff member. Tiffany, the teller, whimpered softly, a tiny sound of pure dread escaping her lips. The security guards looked like cornered animals, their earlier swagger replaced by abject fear, their uniforms suddenly feeling like a heavy shroud. They knew the storm was not just for Brooks. The lead executive, Mr. Harrington, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence like a sharp blade, precise and unyielding. "Mr. Brooks," he began, his tone devoid of any sympathy, "your actions yesterday represent a profound failure of judgment, leadership, and basic human decency. This bank prides itself on serving all its clients with respect and professionalism, regardless of their perceived social standing or financial portfolio. You have demonstrably failed on all counts, Mr. Brooks, and your conduct has severely damaged the trust placed in this institution by the very community it purports to serve. Furthermore, a preliminary review of your recent loan approvals reveals a concerning pattern of favoritism towards larger, often external, agricultural corporations, while consistently rejecting applications from local, family-owned farms, a direct contravention of our founding principles, and a betrayal of the small farmers who are the lifeblood of Copper Creek." Harrington's words exposed a deeper rot, a systemic bias that went far beyond Margaret's personal humiliation. This wasn't just about an old woman. It was about the insidious erosion of the local agricultural economy, the very core of James Cole's life's work. Brooks tried to speak, to stammer an apology, a defense, anything but the words caught in his throat, choked by fear, by the sudden, overwhelming exposure of his true character. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, I had no idea. I apologize profoundly." His voice was a pathetic croak, his hands trembling visibly, a man undone. James finally spoke, his voice quiet, but each word resonated with an icy finality, a sentence delivered without reprieve. "No, Mr. Brooks, you didn't have any idea, and that is precisely the problem. You judged my mother based on her clothes, on her age, on your preconceived notions of worth. You treated her like she didn't exist, just as you systematically dismissed the needs of countless other hardworking families, choosing to serve the distant, powerful interests over the very soil that sustains this county. You created financial chains for those who built this place, while feathering the nests of outsiders. My family's farm, a 100-year legacy, stands as a testament to the resilience of our community, a resilience you sought to undermine with every biased decision." He paused, his gaze boring into Brooks, a force that seemed to peel back layers of pretense. "And in doing so, you demonstrated that you are unfit to manage an institution built on trust, community, and respect for all. You forgot that the true wealth of Copper Creek isn't in marble floors, but in the enduring spirit of its people and the fertile land they tend." Harrington stepped back in, taking command, the gravity of his voice leaving no room for doubt. "Effective immediately, Daniel Brooks, your employment with First Agricultural Bank is terminated. You are to gather your personal belongings under the supervision of security and vacate the premises. All access to bank systems has already been revoked. Furthermore, an independent forensic audit of all transactions and loan applications under your tenure will be initiated immediately, with particular scrutiny on the patterns Mr. Cole has just highlighted. Any evidence of illegal or unethical conduct will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law." The words hit Brooks like a physical blow, stripping him of everything he held dear. He staggered, clutching at the counter for support, his eyes wide with disbelief, the full impact of his fall finally registering. Publicly removed. His career, his arrogant reign, his entire carefully constructed world, collapsing in a single, devastating moment. Poetic justice indeed. The man who had dismissed the value of others was now utterly without value himself. Harrington then turned to the assembled staff, his voice firm, a new, uncompromising directive etched in every syllable. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Every client, every individual who walks through these doors deserves our utmost respect. This bank was founded on the principles of supporting the backbone of this county, its farmers, its families, its community. We will not tolerate class prejudice or condescending behavior. A thorough internal review will commence immediately. Any employee found to have participated in or condoned yesterday's actions, or to have contributed to the systemic issues we've uncovered, will face appropriate disciplinary measures, up to and including termination. His gaze lingered on Tiffany, who now looked as if she might faint, her carefully constructed world crumbling just as Brooks's had. Furthermore, Harrington continued, his voice gaining momentum, new policies will be implemented, focusing on enhanced customer service training, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, and clearer protocols for handling all client requests, regardless of transaction size or perceived status. We will also be installing improved surveillance systems and reviewing all existing footage to ensure full accountability, making sure the integrity of this institution is restored and maintained. We will move this bank into a new era of transparency and community partnership. James Cole, with his mother still at his side, stepped forward once more, his presence a powerful anchor in the turbulent financial waters. He looked at the staff, then at the still-reeling Brooks, his gaze unblinking. "My mother came here for medical funds, a basic human need," he stated, his voice calmer now, but no less authoritative, projecting a vision for the future. "To ensure that no one else faces such indignity when seeking essential services, and to rectify the systemic imbalances that have plagued our agricultural community. My family and I are establishing a new community outreach initiative, in partnership with the bank and the broader Copper Creek Agricultural Cooperative. This initiative will focus on providing easier, more dignified access to financial services for all residents, particularly our seniors and those in vulnerable situations, and will prioritize sustainable loans for local, family-owned farms, reinforcing the very foundation of our county's prosperity. We will ensure that the first agricultural bank lives up to its name, serving the entire agricultural community, not just a select few, and reclaiming its original purpose as a true partner to the land and its people. We are not just changing policies, we are recalibrating its moral compass." He looked at his mother, a gentle, understanding smile gracing his lips. Margaret met his gaze, a quiet strength emanating from her, a profound sense of vindication, of justice served. The pain was still there, a faint echo, but it was overshadowed now by the quiet triumph of dignity restored, not just for her, but for countless others who had been silenced. Her dignity, so cruelly stripped away, had been returned, transformed into a powerful symbol of change. She was no longer invisible. She existed, powerfully and undeniably, a matriarch of a quiet revolution. The manager, stripped of his power, a broken man, was escorted out, his face a canvas of despair, his click of expensive shoes on marble a mocking echo of his former arrogance. The staff, humbled and chastened, watched him go, then turned their attention to the profound implications of this new era, sensing the shifting currents, the quiet dawn of a new, more just system. The cold fluorescence of the bank now seemed to shine with a different, clearer light, illuminating a path towards true service and genuine respect, a promise of a fairer future for all who lived and worked the land of Copper Creek. The harvest, James knew, was just beginning. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel Brooks found himself adrift, his carefully constructed career in tatters. The news had spread like wildfire through Copper Creek and beyond, fueled by the bank's swift, public statement, the unflinching forensic audit, and the inevitable whispers of powerful connections. His name, once synonymous with ruthless efficiency and burgeoning influence, was now tainted, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones across the regional banking network. He tried to apply to other financial institutions, but his calls went unreturned, his resume a glaring red flag that preceded him like a shadow. His arrogance, once his shield, had become his undoing, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The man who had once treated the bank as his private club for the wealthy, dismissing the less fortunate with a sneer, was now an outcast, shunned by the very circles he had so desperately sought to impress. He was reduced to applying for entry-level positions in other towns, far from the gleaming marble halls he once commanded. The bitter taste of his own medicine, far more potent than any stale coffee. His opulent life, meticulously built on the backs of others, crumbled into a quiet, crushing mediocrity, a symmetrical catharsis delivered with the precision of a master strategist. His once smooth hair now receding, his tailor-made suits collecting dust, Brooks became a living ghost, haunted by the ghost of the old woman he had tried to erase, a specter of his own making. Meanwhile, a quiet revolution was unfolding at the First Agricultural Bank. Under the direct oversight of James Cole and the renewed, vigilant leadership of Mr. Harrington, the new policies were rapidly implemented, a testament to true, ethical governance. The Community Outreach Initiative, spearheaded by a newly appointed, empathetic branch manager who genuinely understood the rhythms of agricultural life, began to flourish. Specialized desks were set up to assist elderly clients, ensuring dignity and personalized service, their needs met with genuine care. The security team underwent rigorous retraining, their new directives emphasizing de-escalation and respect, transforming them from intimidating gatekeepers into helpful guides. The bank, once a symbol of cold, exclusive power, was slowly, genuinely transforming into a pillar of the community it was meant to serve, a reflection of the values Margaret Cole embodied. Farmers who had been denied loans under Brooks's regime now found open doors and understanding ears, their harvests saved, their legacies secured. The agricultural economy of Copper Creek, once subtly threatened by internal corruption, now thrived, revitalized by a financial institution that finally understood its true purpose. Margaret Cole, though still preferring her quiet life on the century-old farm, became an unofficial, revered matriarch within the bank's ethos, her story a silent, living creed. She would occasionally visit, not to transact, but to observe, to offer a gentle word of encouragement to a nervous teller, or a knowing nod to the new manager, her presence a constant, living reminder of the bank's renewed commitment to human dignity. She saw the genuine smiles in the staff's eyes, the respectful greetings, the subtle shifts in their body language, and it warmed her heart more than any sum of money could. Her medical needs were met without question, her appointments scheduled with effortless grace, a stark contrast to the terror of that day. She felt seen, respected, cherished, not as a shareholder, but as a person, a valued member of the community she had helped build. The Cole family farm, no longer just a backdrop, now stood as a vibrant testament to resilience and responsible stewardship, its future assured, its legacy deeply intertwined with the revitalized pulse of Copper Creek. One crisp autumn afternoon, months after the incident, Margaret found herself in the bank, observing the bustling, yet respectful atmosphere, a symphony of quiet industry and genuine service. She noticed the new, softer lighting, the comfortable chairs for waiting clients, the subtle shift in energy that spoke of a true transformation from within. As she prepared to leave, a young, earnest security guard, his demeanor one of genuine helpfulness, held the door open for her, a sincere smile on his face. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Cole," he said, his voice deferential, his respect palpable. "It's a pleasure to have you." Margaret smiled back, a true, radiant smile that reached her eyes, reflecting the golden autumn sun. "Thank you, young man," she replied, her voice soft but clear, imbued with the wisdom of a life well lived and a battle justly won. "It's a pleasure to be here." As she stepped outside, the autumn sun, golden and warm, bathed the revitalized bank building in a soft, welcoming glow. The air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant, comforting hum of farm machinery. A world in balance, a community healed. The image of Daniel Brooks's face, contorted in fear and humiliation, was a distant memory, replaced by the enduring power of justice and the quiet triumph of dignity. The system had been broken, its moral compass shattered, but it had also been rebuilt, stronger and fairer, thanks to an old woman who refused to be erased, and a son who understood that true power lay not in dominance, but in the unwavering defense of every soul that contributed to the rich tapestry of the land. In places built on land and labor, never judge a person by their clothes. True authority isn't found in a title or a suit, but in the unwavering commitment to justice and the respect for every human soul. The seeds of change, sown in a moment of profound injustice, had finally borne their righteous fruit. And so, their destiny was forged, a new legacy built from the ashes of the old. Their story now belongs to time, but its power only grows if shared. True authority isn't found in a title or a suit, but in the unwavering commitment to justice and the respect for every human soul. But as one man breaks the system, another is trapped by it. What other unseen forces manipulate our lives, hidden beneath the surface of the mundane? If this journey marked your soul, leave a like and subscribe. For the best stories are those that refuse to die in silence.